North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom, the world's most isolated country, the crazy dictator with nucleus. You think you know this place. You've seen the satellite photos, the dark peninsula at night, surrounded by light. You've seen the goose-stepping soldiers, the mass games, the crying citizens at the funeral of a dear leader. You've heard about the concentration camps, the famine, the family members executing each other for power. And you've concluded, reasonably, that North Korea is simply insane, a rogue state run by a lunatic dynasty that defies rational explanation. Here's the problem. Almost everything you think you know about North Korea is either wrong, incomplete, or being weaponized to stop you from understanding it. Because a North Korea you can't understand is a North Korea you can't deal with, and that suits a lot of powerful people just fine. Today, we're going to break every comfortable assumption you have about the world's most misunderstood country. Welcome to Context Missing. Let's rebuild this from the ground up. Let's start with the biggest misconception of all, that North Korea's leadership is irrational, that Kim Jong-un is simply crazy. This is the most dangerous misunderstanding in modern geopolitics, and it is almost entirely wrong. Kim Jong-un graduated from the University of Bern in Switzerland. He studied physics and public administration. He speaks German. He grew up watching Western movies and NBA basketball. He is not a cartoon villain. He is a highly intelligent, ruthlessly pragmatic political operator who has outmaneuvered every U.S. president since Obama. Think about that. Obama tried strategic patience, waiting for North Korea to collapse. It didn't collapse. It got nukes. Trump tried personal diplomacy. 3 summits with Kim, handshakes, letters, we fell in love. North Korea kept its nukes and got international legitimacy. Biden tried isolation and sanctions. North Korea tested more missiles than in any previous administration and kept its nukes. 3 different strategies, 3 different presidents, 1 outcome. Kim Jong-un still has nuclear weapons and is still in power. That's not the track record of a madman. That's the track record of someone who knows exactly what he's doing. To understand why North Korea behaves the way it does, you need to understand one foundational fact that Western media almost never mentions. The Korean War never officially ended. It's not over. There was an armistice in 1953, a ceasefire, but no peace treaty. North Korea and the United States are technically still at war, right now, as you watch this video. From Pyongyang's perspective, the most powerful military on Earth, which killed an estimated 20% of North Korea's population during the Korean War, has never formally agreed to stop fighting. 20%. 1 in 5 North Koreans died between 1950 and 1953. American bombing campaigns destroyed virtually every significant building in the country. General Curtis LeMay, who ran the U.S. bombing campaign, later said, "We burned down every town in North Korea." He said this matter-of-factly, as a statement of fact. That trauma is not ancient history to North Korean leadership. It is the founding wound of the entire state. It shapes every decision. And then consider what happened to countries that gave up their weapons programs under U.S. pressure. Iraq, Libya, both regimes destroyed. Both leaders dead. Saddam Hussein gave up his WMD program and got invaded anyway. Muammar Gaddafi gave up his nuclear ambitions and got a bayonet. From Kim Jong-un's perspective, the lesson of Iraq and Libya is crystal clear. Nuclear weapons are the only reliable guarantee of regime survival. That's not crazy. That's cold, hard, rational logic. And until the West grapples with that logic honestly, nothing will change. Now let's talk about the Kim dynasty, because the way power actually works in North Korea is far more sophisticated than crazy family rules everything. Kim Il-sung founded North Korea in 1948, but he didn't just build a government, he built a religion with himself as God. The ideology is called Juche, roughly translated as self-reliance. It's a political philosophy that places the Korean nation at the center of its own destiny. In practice, Juche means we don't need the outside world. We are self-sufficient. We are pure. We are besieged, but we will survive. This ideology was brilliantly designed to make external pressure counterproductive. Every sanction, every threat, every condemnation becomes proof that the outside world is trying to destroy Korea. And Kim Il sung layered something even more powerful on top: the Songbun system, a hereditary class structure that assigns every North Korean citizen a loyalty ranking at birth. Your Songbun, based on your family's political history going back to the Korean War, determines where you can live, what jobs you can hold, whether your children go to university. The children of regime loyalists get Pyongyang apartments and university places. The children of suspected dissidents get coal mines and prison camps. This system creates an enormous class of people whose entire privilege depends on the regime's survival. They become its most ferocious defenders, not out of ideology, but out of self-interest. It's a system of social control so elegant that political scientists still study it as one of the most effective mechanisms of authoritarian stability ever designed. Let's talk about the nuclear program, because this is where Western misunderstanding is most costly. The standard Western narrative: North Korea is building nukes because Kim is paranoid and aggressive and wants to threaten the world. The actual strategic logic: North Korea is building nukes because it's the cheapest way to guarantee that nobody does to Pyongyang what Washington did to Baghdad. North Korea's conventional military, while enormous in size, is decades behind South Korea and the US in technology. It cannot win a conventional war. But a nuclear-armed North Korea cannot be invaded. Full stop. No rational government sends troops into a country that can respond with nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-un understood this before he took power. His father, Kim Jong-il, understood it. And so the program continued, through famine, through sanctions, through every diplomatic overture, because it was always the top priority. By 2017, North Korea had successfully tested a hydrogen bomb, orders of magnitude more powerful than the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. By 2022, North Korea had demonstrated ICBMs capable of reaching the continental United States. The program that the world said was years away arrived. And here's the part that makes Western policymakers most uncomfortable: North Korea is probably never giving up those weapons voluntarily. Every negotiation that assumes denuclearization as the end goal is, at this point, negotiating with a premise that the other side has already rejected in practice. The real policy question, the one nobody in Washington wants to say out loud, is not how to denuclearize North Korea, it's how to live with a nuclear North Korea. Now let's talk about the people, because in all the geopolitical analysis, 26 million human beings tend to disappear. The image most Westerners have of ordinary North Koreans, brainwashed automatons, crying on cue at state funerals, believing everything the government tells them. The reality, according to defectors, researchers, and the rare journalist who has spent serious time inside the country, is far more nuanced. North Koreans are not stupid. They know their government lies to them. They have always known this. They just can't say so publicly. There's a concept in North Korea called naembi, the inner room. What you say in public and what you think in private are completely different things. In public, you praise the dear leader. You attend the mandatory political meetings. You perform the required loyalty. In private and trusted family circles, people complain about food shortages, corrupt officials, the gap between propaganda and reality. This is not unique to North Korea. It's the universal psychology of life under authoritarian systems. Soviets did it, East Germans did it, Chinese do it. What makes North Korea different is the totality of the surveillance and the consequences of being caught in that inner room by the wrong person. Let's talk about the class system inside North Korea, because it's nothing like the flat, uniformly miserable place Western media portrays. Pyongyang is a city of approximately 3 million people, and it bears almost no resemblance to the rest of the country. Pyongyang has department stores, restaurants, a water park, a ski resort, apartment buildings with actual elevators, and a functioning metro system decorated with chandeliers. The elite class, senior party officials, military officers, scientists, and their families live lives that would be recognizable to middle-class people almost anywhere. They watch foreign films on USB drives smuggled in from China. They listen to K-pop, officially banned, increasingly common. They own smartphones. They care about fashion. Below them is the vast majority of North Koreans, the workers, the farmers, the ordinary citizens in provincial towns and villages. Their lives are genuinely hard. Power cuts lasting most of the day, food that depends heavily on the harvest, access to healthcare that varies enormously by location, and Songbun ranking. And then at the bottom, the political prisoners. Estimated 80,000 to 120,000 people in a network of camps that the UN has compared to the Nazi concentration camps in their systematic brutality. Three completely different North Koreas existing simultaneously: the showpiece capital, the struggling countryside, and the gulag that nobody outside is supposed to know about. The black market deserves its own section because it may be the most important force reshaping North Korean society right now. In the 1990s, North Korea experienced a catastrophic famine. Between 500,000 and 3 million people died. Estimates vary widely because the regime won't release data. The state distribution system, which was supposed to provide every citizen with food, collapsed completely. People were left to survive on their own. And so they did. Spontaneously, illegally, and unstoppably, North Koreans created markets, called Jangmadang, literally market grounds. Farmers sold surplus crops. Women set up stalls selling anything they could acquire. Small-scale traders began moving goods between cities. The regime initially tried to suppress the markets. It failed. The markets were the only thing keeping people alive, and even the security forces used them. Today, the Jangmadang system is enormous. It's estimated that the majority of North Korean households now get most of their income from market activity, not state allocation. This matters enormously because markets create something authoritarian systems desperately fear: economic independence from the state. A North Korean who feeds her family through the market doesn't need the regime's food rations, and someone who doesn't need the regime's food rations is harder to control. The Jangmadang didn't topple the regime, but it has quietly, irreversibly changed the relationship between North Korean citizens and their government. Kim Jong-un knows this. He's tried to co-opt it, taxing markets, licensing traders, taking a cut. The genie is out of the bottle. He can't put it back. Let's talk about information, because the battle over what North Koreans know is one of the most important and underreported conflicts of our time. The North Korean government maintains what may be the most comprehensive information blockade in human history. No open internet. A state intranet called Kwangmyong with only approved content. All radios and televisions pre-tuned to government frequencies. Foreign media, death penalty. And yet, information gets in, relentlessly, unstoppably, through USB drives and SD cards smuggled across the Chinese border. South Korean dramas, American movies, foreign news broadcasts, K-pop music videos, all of it flows in on tiny drives that can be hidden in a shoe. Organizations like Flash Drives for Freedom have sent hundreds of thousands of USB drives into North Korea. Balloon launches from South Korea carry radio receivers and printed materials across the DMZ. The regime responds with electronic jamming, border crackdowns, and periodic execution of people caught with foreign media, and the information keeps coming anyway. Defectors consistently report that exposure to outside information, particularly South Korean dramas showing ordinary people living comfortable, free lives, is one of the biggest factors in their decision to leave. The information war is slow. It's invisible. It won't topple the regime tomorrow, but it is changing what North Koreans believe is possible, and that matters enormously in the long run. Now let's address the relationship that makes the whole North Korea problem impossible to solve without understanding it: China. China shares a 1,400-kilometer border with North Korea. It provides an estimated 90% of North Korea's energy and a majority of its food imports. Without China, the North Korean regime would face economic collapse within months. China is, functionally, North Korea's life support system. So why doesn't China just pull the plug, turn off the oil, close the border, and let the regime collapse? because China desperately does not want what comes after. A collapsed North Korea means millions of refugees flooding into northeastern China, a region already dealing with economic decline. It means U.S. allied South Korean troops potentially moving to the Chinese border, something Beijing considers strategically catastrophic. It means loose nuclear weapons in a failed state, a nightmare scenario for every government on Earth, but especially for China. And it means the elimination of what Beijing considers a strategic buffer, a friendly state between Chinese territory and U.S. military forces in South Korea. China doesn't love North Korea. Xi Jinping reportedly has genuine contempt for Kim Jong-un, but China needs North Korea to exist, just not to be so provocative that it drags China into a conflict. This is why every round of UN sanctions on North Korea includes Chinese and Russian vetoes or abstentions on the strongest measures, not because they approve of North Korea's behavior, because they're more afraid of North Korea's collapse. Let's talk about the sanctions, because they've been the cornerstone of Western policy for decades, and the evidence for their effectiveness is, charitably, mixed. The United States has maintained comprehensive sanctions on North Korea since the Korean War, 70 years of economic pressure. The UN Security Council has passed multiple rounds of increasingly severe sanctions, targeting coal exports, seafood, textiles, oil imports, and the overseas labor that earns the regime hard currency. The theory: squeeze the economy hard enough, and the regime either collapses or comes to the negotiating table ready to deal. The practice: North Korea has continued its nuclear and missile programs through every round of sanctions. It now has hydrogen bombs and ICBMs. The sanctions did not stop this. What sanctions did do? They made ordinary North Koreans poorer, hurt the civilian economy, reduced access to medicines and agricultural equipment. The regime, as authoritarian regimes reliably do, protected its own interests first: the military, the party elite, the nuclear program, and let the population absorb the pain. This is not a North Korea-specific finding. It's what sanctions research consistently shows across dozens of countries and decades of data. Sanctions that hurt civilians without changing elite behavior are not a policy. They're a performance of resolve, expensive for the target population, cheap for the sender, and largely ineffective at the stated goal. Nobody in Washington wants to say this out loud, because the alternative requires either accepting a nuclear North Korea or trying something genuinely different. Both are politically costly. Here's something that almost never gets discussed in Western coverage: North Korea's view of South Korea and how it's been changing. For decades, the regime's propaganda portrayed South Korea as a poverty-stricken American colony, its people desperate for liberation by the North. Then USB drives started arriving, and North Koreans started watching South Korean dramas. They saw South Korean apartments, South Korean cars, South Korean fashion, South Korean people arguing with their government on television and not being arrested. The propaganda collapsed, not from outside military pressure, not from sanctions, but from people watching Crash Landing on You on a smuggled USB drive in their kitchen. Kim Jong-un has responded by making consumption of South Korean media a crime punishable by death. In 2020, he passed the Anti-Reactionary Thought Law, specifically targeting K-pop and South Korean entertainment. You don't make something punishable by death unless you're genuinely afraid of it. Kim Jong-un is afraid of Korean dramas. Let that sink in. The regime that survived famine, sanctions, and international isolation for 70 years may ultimately be most threatened by a television show about a South Korean heiress falling in love with a North Korean soldier. Let's talk about what a realistic North Korea policy actually looks like, because maximum pressure clearly isn't working, and strategic patience clearly isn't working. Option 1: accept North Korea as a nuclear state and pursue arms control. Freeze the program where it is. Establish communication channels to reduce accident risk. Normalize relations incrementally. This is what South Korea's progressive governments have periodically attempted. It's politically toxic in Washington. It feels like rewarding bad behavior, but it's the most realistic path to stability. Option 2: Regime change. Support internal dissent. Flood the country with information. Squeeze the economy until the system breaks. This has been unofficial U.S. policy for decades. It hasn't worked. The regime has proved extraordinarily resilient, and the risks of a chaotic collapse, loose nukes, refugee crisis, regional war may be worse than the current situation. Option 3. Grand Bargain. Comprehensive deal. Peace treaty, normalized relations, economic opening, in exchange for verifiable denuclearization. This is what every U.S. president has nominally pursued. North Korea has negotiated these talks in bad faith repeatedly, using them to buy time for the nuclear program while collecting sanctions relief. The uncomfortable truth is that none of these options is good. They're a spectrum of bad, worse, and catastrophic, and the world has been choosing between them for 30 years without resolution. Here's my honest assessment of what North Korea actually is, stripped of the mythology on both sides. It is not a failed state. Failed states don't maintain nuclear weapons programs, run sophisticated cyber operations, and export ballistic missile technology to Iran and Russia. It is not a madhouse. It is a rational, if brutal, authoritarian system optimized for one purpose above all others: the survival of the Kim family and the party elite. It is not unchanging. The black markets, the information flows, the generational shift in what ordinary North Koreans believe, these are real changes happening in slow motion beneath the surface. It is not unsolvable, but solving it requires being honest about what the other side actually wants. And what it actually wants is security guarantees and regime survival, not ideological victory. Every time the West has offered denuclearization in exchange for economic incentives, it has assumed North Korea values economic development over survival guarantees. That assumption has been wrong every single time. Let's end where we began, with that satellite image. North Korea at night, dark, surrounded by the lights of South Korea, China, Japan. That image gets used constantly as a symbol of failure, of backwardness, of a country left behind by history. But look at it differently for a moment. A country with a GDP smaller than the state of Vermont has kept 3 U.S. presidents at bay for 3 decades. It built nuclear weapons despite being one of the most sanctioned economies on Earth. It developed ICBMs that Pentagon officials said were years away, ahead of schedule. It has maintained internal political stability, brutal, oppressive stability, but stability through famine, economic collapse, and the deaths of 2 supreme leaders. It has played China, Russia, South Korea, and the United States against each other with skill that would impress Machiavelli. None of this is admirable. The human cost, the camps, the famine, the crushed lives of 26 million people is a moral catastrophe that demands accountability. But confusing evil with incompetent is a mistake that has cost the world 30 years of failed policy. North Korea is not what you think. It is not crazy. It is not random. It is not about to collapse. It is a rational system built around irrational premises that a small, poor country can permanently defy the world's most powerful nations through nuclear deterrence and information control. And so far, to the profound discomfort of everyone involved, it's working. The dark peninsula in that satellite image isn't just darkness. It's a 26 million person experiment in how far a government can control reality and how long it can last. The answer, so far, is longer than anyone predicted, and the ending, when it comes, will reshape East Asia in ways we can't fully anticipate. Understanding what North Korea actually is, not the cartoon version, not the propaganda version, but the real, complicated, brutal, rational version, is the first step toward dealing with it in a way that doesn't make things worse. That's the context that's been missing. Subscribe if you want more of it, and tell me in the comments what surprised you most. See you next time.